So recently, TDX has released the long-awaited Nightmare Mode update, and since I'm finally done with Arknights for a while, where I leave that community to starve, I can finally come back to talk about this game. I am so glad to be back home. Anyway, we got a lot of stuff to talk about since this update is pretty solid. I must congratulate John for actually making something decent for once. I did not expect this update to have so much thought put into it. I myself had really low expectations, but I guess I'll just talk about everything. The update is not so far from perfect, so I won't waste your time and just get into the video itself. The gameplay of Nightmare Mode is somewhat inconsistent. I'll be honest, the pacing of normal Nightmare can be put into question. I have genuinely no idea whose idea was it to make some of the decisions to the wave structure. I mean, this was never really a problem for TDX, maybe aside from a few instances, like Endless Mode. But Nightmare Mode is on a whole nother level. Certain waves will feel like they just pass by, and certain waves will just feel like a slog. My main example of this is going to be Wave 37. This is a mini-boss wave where the Jagger enemy gets introduced, and instead of getting straight to the point on this wave, you have to sit through an entire 3 minutes just to get to the boss. Usually, I would never have a problem with something like this, but when every single other wave before this one was at least somewhat fast-paced, and you throw in this wave to throw the pacing that you've built up into the bin, then what the fuck was the point of that entire build-up? After this wave, the pacing changes back to the somewhat fast-paced gameplay that TDX is known for. What I can also criticize is the amount of filler waves that this mode has. I don't know what is it with TDX and filler waves, but this mode has a few of these waves, namely Wave 38 and Wave 49. Some could even argue that waves like 31, 41, and 43 are also filler waves, but I think that Wave 38 and 49 are the biggest cases of them being a filler wave with practically no reason to exist. I guess some people can argue that Wave 38 is there to throw in multipliers for the people that intend to skip Wave 37 and have no idea that Wave 38 is going to make their problems 10 times worse. But Wave 49 is literally just a grumble with 800% more health, so take that as you will. The Emperor fight itself is okay, I guess. I mean, it isn't anything that the community hasn't from John. Maybe aside from the time stop ability, which is fundamentally the exact same as Commander Frosty, and that boss constantly draining your cash supply because everything has shield health for God knows what reason. I can definitely compare these two bosses as having basically the same gimmick. Commander Frosty hits your base, and if you don't heal it, then too bad, and the Emperor used time stop on set map triggers that give you that vibe of urgency. This boss is basically, you either have Refractor and this boss is going to be super easy, or you don't and the boss is going to be extremely obnoxious to fight against. There isn't all that much to say on Emperor, but what I think I should briefly mention is Nightmare Mode and reusing enemies. I made a pretty big deal out of this when Alpha Predator was first teased, and I'll be honest, that was one of the stupidest posts I have ever made in my entire career. I still feel guilty of even thinking that writing such a post was even a good idea. I even remember doubling down like a dumbass, but let's just maybe not talk about that because kind of embarrassing. Nightmare Mode reusing enemies isn't that big of a deal. I will be completely honest here. My philosophy of tower defense games needing to actually use original enemies for their modes is flawed, to say the least. Bringing up such an argument without really having any good evidence to back it up is kind of pointless. While playing through this mode, I didn't really have any issues with enemies from Elite Mode, Expert Mode, or even Endless Mode showing up. I think that was the least problematic thing when it comes to this entire mode. There's also the special wave to talk about. I can't say all that much about it besides the map that you need to activate it on. Finality is a cool map from the general concept of it and it having ties in the lore with the Calamity. There's no doubt about it, but holy shit, do I not want to play that map ever again after completing Special Wave, because that map by itself makes the game last nearly an entire hour and a half for most casual player runs, and that just is not fun. The way you activate the mode itself is just by going through a door that is totally not an SML reference, and Marvin with Does Bad Things Guide totally aren't canon to the lore of the game. I refuse to believe that this isn't an SML reference, but you need to get a device after you enter the room, and you need to go on the dreaded map that is Finality, and you get a very ominous line of text that is really similar to Isle and its way of freaking you out. The gameplay concept is simple enough. You got a Calamity that spawns before the main boss, so you just don't spam anti-air towers and win the wave instantly. You need to have a balance between air defense and ground defense. This is another one of those waves where at first it's really simple and slow paced, but after the main boss spawns in, everything just turns into chaos, where you have less than 5 FPS, and there's a million enemies banging at your doorstep because they hadn't had their morning beer yet. Yes, I'm serious about that. It's the only way I can think of to describe how this wave goes. Ultra Nightmare is also a thing. It's another one of those non-canon modes where the game throws everything it has at you and hopes it sticks, which I guess it works. This is probably the first time that I'm ever going to say something like this actually works in TDX's favor. Using those drop pods for the early game was something that I think normal mode should have done as well. The first 10 waves are literally just the game spawning drop pods with a ludicrous amount of enemies. There's no real incentive to play the mode more than once for the John skins, since the crystals that you get aren't really going to help you, since you kind of need most of the Nightmare Towers to beat the mode anyway. This mode seems to fix the pacing of normal Nightmare, which is nice, but it still doesn't exactly fix the internal problem that I had with the latter to begin with. There's also power-ups, which I'm just briefly going to mention here. They aren't really anything interesting currently. There's like a bunch of support power-ups that you're basically able to use on every single tower besides Refractor, and there's also the equivalent of the Punk Buster power-up, which isn't really anything worth of note. The Nightmare Mode update added a lot to the lore of the game. There's a whole lot to mention here, but I don't think I'll bother too much, since I know as much about the lore as the next person beside me when you ask them what the hell is going on with Hoyoverse. This update focuses on the dynamic between Xenon and the GDA a little more and gives us some context to how everything even started. It's basically what the game has been basing off of. We get to learn a lot more on the Calamity that has been pretty damn mysterious ever since it was first introduced. The main way of showing the story is through the new special wave, where after giving Mallory her deserved rest, the player can see a flashback of how Xenon left the GTA after sacrificing Mallory to the Calamity. There's obviously a lot more implications when it comes to who was actually piloting Emperor, who else did Xenon sacrifice after Mallory, what did Xenon even gain out of sacrificing Mallory, who the hell is it that appeared after Mallory's sacrifice, who is it? No, better question. What was it that appeared in front of Xenon after Mallory was sacrificed? Questions. How is John going to answer them in the lore? Maybe he has already answered some of the questions somewhere in the game. Oh, I don't know. But I want to know how the story goes forward. This story has so much untapped potential. There's obviously the maps as well that have lore implications of their own, but I won't even bother trying to start theorizing for that since I'm not the type of person to start theorizing into the unknown. I think I'll let Rogue Ordinary and not Oof Legacy try to figure that bullshit out. let me quickly just talk about the progression system of the Nightmare Mode update. There isn't much to cover besides the new currency, which are Nightmare Crystals, or Crystals. Before this update even released, I was skeptical of how this currency would work in practice since, as you may already know, when tower defense games decide to add a second currency into their games, it usually doesn't end well, but TDX somehow broke this curse. I mean, obviously, this currency isn't automatically perfect, it's unapologetically boring, but I'll be honest, most concepts in the tower defense genre on Roblox are unapologetically boring that I'll let this one slide. There's a lot of ways to get crystals currently, whether it being the easiest way, which is just playing Nightmare Mode. You're also able to get them from Expert Mode, Endless Mode, or events when you beat the Nightmare difficulty of said events. There's also achievements, which I don't know why, but I only realized that you can get crystals after getting the Behemoth Tower, where I could have gotten Refractor after like 2 more games of grinding. I'm still going to hate myself for that. There's also Mr. Ronald, that is probably one of the biggest scams. I mean, if you have a few million gold lying around, this isn't the worst way of getting gems, but it isn't viable. I'll tell you that much. Besides that, there isn't necessarily anything worth of note when it comes to the progression system. It's bare bones and uninteresting, but all that matters is that it worked and that I don't have to critique it extensively. So that's fun. This update added 4 completely new towers into the game. Besides Combat Medic. Apparently that one got postponed for whatever reason. So to make this video a little longer, I might as well talk about my thoughts on them. No, this section isn't going to explain to you how to use every single tower because Rogue Ordinary has already done that. Alright, we're gonna go from the least expensive towers to the most expensive one, so we got Shield Tower first, and I'm going to say it right now, I was very skeptical, like about everything else about this update, when I first heard about this tower. I thought it is going to instantly be a meta tower required for every mode. Surprisingly, I have no idea how, but the balancing team behind TDX actually made the tower balanced. It's a tower that is recommended for making every game mode a lot easier, but it doesn't completely ruin the point of Medic. It's really nice to see that the top path of the tower has shared shield health across all towers, and the bottom path has healing and individual tower HP. For some reason, I saw people say that the top path is much better than the bottom path, but that's very much up to the situation that you're put in during the game. Personally, I think most of the time you're going to use the bottom path since it gives a stupid amount of healing, because I didn't really find the top path to be of any use besides maybe the early game of Nightmare Mode, but that's about it. There isn't much else to the tower besides it being really good at what it's supposed to do, which is giving shield to your units while also giving healing, where it's also vulnerable to being destroyed by the enemies that are able to attack it. It's a fair payoff for what it is. Next up, we got Behemoth, one of the more anticipated towers by the community, and I gotta give it to the developers. I thought it was going to be a lazy knockoff Armored Factory, which, I mean, it somewhat is, but not to the extent I personally expected it to be. The tower is still really strong and rivals War Machine. I have absolutely no idea why this tower was clowned on when the update was first released, and it took a few videos of people showcasing the tower to actually change the others' opinions. The fucking slander this tower got on release was absolutely diabolical. I think that this tower is in a pretty good spot currently. The top path can be used on a bit longer maps and has flying detection for some reason with some of the most diabolical cost efficiency in the game. I'm not kidding. This tower is actually fucking butchered when it comes to the top path. Bottom path exists, full-on laser damage, and nothing else. This tower is fun. I have no reason to complain about it. You know what? Might as well mark this as single-handedly one of the coolest tower concepts that I've seen in a while. The concept of mechanical walkers has been done before a few times, but this is personally my favorite one so far. Yes, it's because of the bottom path. How could you tell? I mean, who the hell doesn't think that a mechanical walker uppercutting a boss and sending them back a bit isn't cool? Huh? That's what I thought. The tower itself is pretty strong, but its main drawback on the bottom path is that it takes a long time to respawn. Around 4 minutes or something. The top path is also pretty good. They spawn much more frequently because it only takes around 2.5 minutes for a maxed out top path to spawn. They also spawn in pairs. I'm pretty sure the top path also has flying detection, but at the same time, it doesn't have stealth detection, so this tower is somewhat viable for being a sub DPS during the special wave. I'm pretty sure if you want to use this tower, you need to have Golden Mobster since this tower is expensive. Pretty sure it's even more expensive than Refractor by like 300,000 cash. Speaking of Refractor, let's get that tower out of the way. Refractor is a pure DPS tower that specializes in beaming bosses and not much else. Think of it as Phaser from tower battles, but it doesn't have that stupidly long cooldown between attacking enemies. Top Path specializes in chained attacks while also ignoring one of the main mechanics of the game, which is line of sight. Besides the fact that if you place Refractor, it's most likely that you're already going to increase your chances of winning the game by around 99.9%. If the player knows how to utilize the tower correctly, which isn't that hard, considering that most TDX players have more than 2 leftover brain cells, but even that's too much praise of the TDX community. This tower is really expensive just like War Machine, but this is overall a much more expensive tower due to dynamic price scaling. Yes, they use dynamic price scaling feature again, but it's not as bad as the XWM turret incident after they first introduced the mechanic. Guess I'm done talking about this update. I hope I didn't miss anything in the video. There isn't much to critique on this update besides maybe the gameplay of normal Nightmare mode and how the developers yet again mess up the pacing because they just needed this mode to have 50 waves. This mode could have had 45 waves and nobody would have complained unironically, but it doesn't. And I doubt the developers will change the wave structure like the Tower Blitz developers did, where they changed expert mode to have 40 waves and then they changed it again to have 50 waves after some time. I think that the crystal currency is an okay addition. While there were definitely better ideas to have a way to get the towers besides a new currency, I don't really know, maybe like missions or something. Sorry, I don't really have a better concept to drop here. Besides that, there could be missions to get each tower. The music was also fun to listen to and didn't make my ears bleed. Thank fucking God, for once my ears weren't bleeding from listening to a TDX track. Holy hell, a blessing in disguise. I think I'll stop wasting your precious time here and just end the video since I have nothing else to talk about on this update. This was your host, Mars Detected, now clocking off.